back to Inner Peace Better Health with Saima, where we untangle life's emotional knots to reveal clarity and calm. And today we are joined with a powerhouse coach and boundary breaker, Ronni Landeck, from flipping through how to win friends at beachside pool to empowering women and people of color in STEM. Ronnie has turned her hustle into heart-centered coaching. And today we are diving into a topic we all wrestle with: why setting boundaries feels so hard and how it's tied directly to our peace, power, and physical wealth. So, Ronnie, your boundary work is rooted in deep personal grit. So, why do you think that, high achievers, especially women and people of color, often feel guilt when setting limits?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Why is it hard? Like we know on a logical level that boundaries help us, but it's what makes it so hard. Um, Several factors, but I think foundationally we aren't often taught how to create them in a way that feels healthy and also that is always successful, right? Because it's definitely about being very clear on the inside, where like the intent behind them. Once you're very clear about it, then the confidence can shine through, right? So it's getting the foundational step has to be done, the work on the inside first. Um,
Hmm.
because then if we're not consistent, that is exactly why boundaries can end up being ineffective. That can be discouraging. That can make people have outcomes that are maybe the opposite of what they hoped for. So um, I believe the guilt comes from a mis a misunderstanding that we are somehow not being kind when we say no or set a clear limit. Um, and when I work with clients, one of the key things we often arrive at, one of the key truths is that we're actually being more kind when we do set a boundary. We're being more kind not only to the other person because we're going to be able to serve better or produce or perform better in that context, or if it's a relationship, maybe we'll be able to connect better with healthy boundaries in place. But also, it's kind also to ourselves, right? So it's a foundational issue of how compassionate and kind are we towards ourselves as the first level of being able to create healthy boundaries.
Hmm. So, was there a moment in your own life when you realized that saying yes too often was hurting more than helping?
Oh, yes. It's even something that, it was so ingrained that I didn't even realize that it was a, um, integral part to how I was living, and I'm sure I'm not alone in that. I know for sure I'm not alone in that. So it was so much a default mode, and a lot of the people who are struggling right now. Perhaps you have a career, you have a family, you have, things you want to do in your personal life. And the achiever tends to say, if I want to enjoy more and get more, then I'm just going to say yes to more and do more, right? Do more. And then suddenly everything gets better is the false belief. When in fact, doing less because you've prioritized the things that actually are significant to you or things that actually have a lasting impact on a true level, those things are the ones, if you say yes to those and say no to some of the others that maybe have just been pushed onto your plate, or that you are somehow meeting a societal expectation by saying yes to, when you can get clarity on what is really important to you, um, then you won't have to um, feel like adding one more thing is the solution. Um, for me personally, I would say as a mother, I have three children. They're all grown and they're amazing humans. They're all ages 20 and up now. But when I was, a newer mom, let's say the first, 10 to 15 years of being a mom is what I might call newer, and also working at my career to achieve, to provide a lifestyle for my family out of care and love, I would find myself thinking, I'm going to say yes and then figure out how to make it work after I say yes. That was sort of my inner attitude. Um, my inner resolve. And that did get rewarded and it did work well until it didn't, right? There's a tipping point where suddenly you're not yourself anymore or you've lost who you
Mhm.
are, perhaps. So for me, when I kind of realized I kind of lost a sense of my own identity, everything that I was doing was defined by something outside of me. That was when I had that realization. And actually, it was my one of my children was like, "Mom, why don't you find things that intrinsically motivate you more versus the things where like fear of dropping the ball or fear of not reaching a goal is motivating you? How about finding something inside, something intrinsic that drives you?" And I really, had to pause and think that was wisdom coming from a child, and I loved it. Um, so so for me, that might have been a pivotal conversation, a pivotal moment where I chose to pause and assess differently and start to assess differently. And to this day, I would say I'm still on that journey of assessing what is mine to own and what is not.
Sometimes we are taught that being agreeable equals being good, but actually, peace doesn't come from pleasing, right?
Right, right.
Hmm.
Yeah, that desire to please, thinking I will be accepted if I say yes, and perhaps I won't be accepted if I don't say yes. Yeah, that's a very um, sort of controlling kind of thought, right? And doesn't yield peace, doesn't yield flow and enjoyment of the activities we're doing. Whether we're working hard or not, there can still be enjoyment and flow in those times. Because no doubt, if you are raising children and have a career, or even if you don't have children, but if you have this, life in the professional world is demanding. So it's how can how can we approach this and learn to approach in ways that are healthier, and boundaries are key element, a key skill to have.
Absolutely. Now, you're coach leaders in STEM, so how do cultural or workplace norms uniquely impact boundary struggles in those environments?
I believe one of the hallmarks, and I see it many times and hear it from my clients I work with, is they have to overwork or overperform, almost to prove that they belong there. And it's happening because clearly, if you're swimming upstream, you're one of few women in that field, or you're one of the only women at the table, as a leader in STEM specifically, or a woman of color. If you're in an environment where you stand out in a way that others may not right off the bat, depending on who they are, give you the respect based on your accomplishments that they would also give to somebody else. So it's definitely a lens that we're viewed through and are aware of. So knowing that, the tendency to feel like we have to prove we belong, um, do double the work just to meet the standard. That's sort of an underlying pressure that my clients feel. So part of what I love to talk with them about and work on is what is actually what actually is the formula, their unique individual fingerprint. What is your formula for being successful and knowing that you are a success versus um, trying to rise to some standard that isn't true or real or healthy. So examining the culture you're in, company culture, and examining how you want to show up powerfully in that context is really a lot of the work that we do. And it's per person. Every person has their experience, their values, their unique core
Mhm.
personal values that they're coming from, working from.
So, do you find your clients more afraid of letting others down or disappointing themselves?
Yeah, I think it's a mix, but I would say a theme often that does come up is they don't want to let others down. They've made it to a certain level of achievement because of their sense of responsibility and how they go the extra mile, and they've done this advanced, education and put it into play, so they are afraid that others, may be let down. Or if there has been, let's say there has been something that has happened that was a difficult work scenario, maybe a boss that didn't you know didn't click with them on some level, or their work wasn't seen for what they thought it was. Something goes wrong, we'll just say. Um, in those cases, that can become something like a little scar, a little scar tissue builds up, and that affects future interactions. So it's very natural for our minds to say, well, that happened then, be careful so it doesn't happen again, right? And in truth, with that in our minds, it often will hold us back and have us create limitations that are actually inner limitations, not external ones at times. So it's really taking experience for what it is, learning from it, and recovering in a way that feels very self-nurturing, but also very focused on possibility and what is to come. What can I learn? What can I contribute? Um, how can I show up in a way that serves others in the way that I'd like? So really reframing some of the experiences we've had proves to be very powerful.
It's wild that how many of us are burning out in the name of loyalty when the real loyalty should be to our own well being, right?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Come, it's easy to say I'm sticking with this company because, I've been here so long, or they've promoted me and developed me, right? Or maybe the things or the person who mentors us. We feel like we are being good people by being loyal to that company, when in fact there's often a tipping point where we've forgotten to be loyal to ourselves and what we truly um, can bring to life, right? Bring to the company or another company by switching, or
Mhm.
making a pivot that really reflects more of where we are now, because we evolve, we change, we've expanded our skill sets and our perspectives that sometimes change while it is stressful or scary in the moment, definitely can yield much more impact in our career and much more fulfillment in our overall picture.
Absolutely. Now, you have balanced motherhood, leadership, and a coaching career. So, do you think that healthy boundaries can actually increase our capacity rather than limit it?
Definitely can increase our capacity. Um, I have a framework that I work through with each person, and I sort of have this template in the back of my mind. It's not linear. It's more like um, pick up the tool that works at the moment. And one of the parts of this framework is the component of resting and reviving. That's huge, and that's been in my framework from the beginning, years and years and years ago. I knew that we can talk about, raising performance all the time, but the other side of that coin is resting and reviving. Even our physical bodies do that, right? If we're exercising, building strength on some sort of regimen, there has to be recovery for actual strength to build to its optimal, right? And I look at life that way as well. Um, you may be climbing and contributing and changing to different hats and roles through the day, through the week, but your body does tell you when it needs quiet, when it needs stillness, when it needs, I don't know, a hot bath, or time to dive into a book that's just a sort of an escape. So whatever that might be, or a silly, conversation with an old friend who doesn't care about your job and the things the ladder you're climbing per se. Um, where just resting and reviving lets all these things sort of the dust can settle, the pathways in your mind can heal, recover, solidify the ones that you're really intentionally building. And then also just pausing during those times to be grateful. And it sounds perhaps oversimplified, but the power of being grateful and reflective on what you're doing and who you're being um, is going to yield a lot more capacity than we give it credit for.
That's so true, Ronnie. It's like boundaries give our energy a container, not a cage, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Mm,
We have I love to look at energy. That's key to the conversation because energy is something we generate and apply to the things, but we can also have leaks, leaks in that bucket that drain our energy, right, over time. And so often we're not even aware of what exactly is influencing that, what's causing that leak. Um, and there are many categories of ways that I look at that. You have influence on your energy that comes from spiritual factors, purpose and mission. There are physical factors that affect our energy. People will say, "Oh, I don't have time to eat healthy," they might tell themselves that, or um, they might have relationships that drain that energy, right? Perhaps trying to meet someone else's expectation for them and their definition of success, or relationships that just um, do not build our sense of our value, and don't challenge us in positive ways. So it can be relational, spiritual, physical. We can have mental energy drains. It could be as simple as, um, how are we focusing our attention? Attention's the biggest commodity right now. Are you able to do one thing at a time and do it well? You know, that's key. And for how many hours a day are you truly productive compared to what we try to squeeze out of our our mental capacity. Other influencers could be emotional influencers, right? How am I experiencing the things I'm going through? Am I finding joy? Am I finding peace and gaining wisdom, or am I feeling like I'm in survival mode? Driven by fear of I can't let anything slow down. So all of these factors are powerful to look at so that you can have more intention and um, more decisive action as we're going through our week and our days.
that completely makes sense. So, can you share one small but powerful boundary you would like to recommend listeners try today?
Yeah, sure, sure. I was talking with um, a high achieving professional just earlier today, and in her words, the messages coming into her inbox, felt like they would throw her into a sort of like a panic, right? Like, oh my goodness, everything's piling up. I'll never be done. And I know that is a very um, persistent and pervasive situation across the board for people in their jobs, right? You answer one email to find that three new ones have popped up. So, um, one solution that I offered her was to communicate with her team of direct reports to say, I'm going to be checking my inbox, let's say the top of every hour. And at that time, I'll be able to respond and maybe batch my answers. And this you can take it for how it makes sense. Maybe you will tell your team, I'm checking my inbox for anything you all need every day at 12 and 4, whatever it is. But nonetheless, you are now determining your own priorities if you are creating that boundary of how often you're going to be accessed or accessible, and instead of all the messages coming in creating your priorities, right? So your priorities are always foggy, shifting, and usually not productive, and that leads to that sense of panic and lack of being able to control your work and your productivity, and therefore control many parts of our lives, right? It can be very stressful in that way. So, this solution was one where a boundary where she's able to roll this out to her team and say, hey, over the next week or two, here's a new approach I'm taking. Here's how often I will be checking to see what you are communicating towards me. And if there is something that is very time sensitive and can't wait until my time that I'm telling you I'm checking in, if it's top of the hour in this case, if it is something that's more urgent than that, then here is how I'd like for you to reach me, and be very clear, specific about what that should look like. Um, just that one tool, that one initiative gave her a complete sense of like lightness. Like she felt light. She felt like it was going to be manageable. Like she was going to have a measure of control over how she was running her day, her day and her work. So that was one that I feel like is concrete and actionable for most anyone. You can be clear about when you're going to be checking and when you would be able to hear back from this leader or this person in business that you're doing business with. So, yeah, was that the sort of thing you were looking for?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. It's like boundaries don't have to be big or loud. They can be gentle yet firm declarations of self-respect, right?
Oh, definitely. They don't have to be loud and they don't have to be sweeping because often one small shift leads to many other great results, right? Like you may affect your how often people can access you for help or for information, and in doing that, you're able to have this time to think through and create clear expectations for those that you lead, if you have a team that you lead, or if it's family related, it might create space and time, space for you to think about how do I want to handle my interactions differently with this person that I care about. So it can cause shifts in all uh, zones of your life if you start implementing some of these smaller boundaries that are healthy.
I completely agree with that, Ronnie. That was really a grounded, galvanizing conversation with you, and your words reminded us that boundaries aren't walls, they bridge us to peace. And for all our listeners, follow Ronnie's work and take one bold step today to honor your word. Until next time, protect your energy, speak your truth, and keep choosing.